King 5 standard C-bet. I mean standard raise. I decided to C-bet since I think he's probing turns pretty wide with any two cards. Now I decided to check back the turn since I picked up a little equity, and I think the 10 of X hits his range pretty hard. On the river, I don't think he's giving me credit for much, and I have a little showdown value, so I decided to check it back. And I think he shows like 9x or something, which he wouldn't have folded, so. Oh, I missed 1 second. Yeah, okay. Like the Queen 9 hand, standard flat, and I decided not to probe the turn here because 8x, 6x, draws, stuff like that, they're not folding, and he's seen me probe a lot, so I'm not going to get much credit, and I have no draw really, so I basically give up. On the Jack 5, I decided to not only 3-bet here. I'd much rather it be Jack 5 suited, but I think given the game flow, etc., I think it's okay to mix this in that range as well. And I do pot size with bluffs at this stack. I decided to fold the Jack 8. If it was suited, I would have called. Also need to be aware that he's opening his non-all-in 3-betting range, for sure. Like, it's getting wider as we speak. The 10-3 suited, pretty standard raise. And with the King Queen real quick, I did my non-pot size, like my smaller size with a hand like King Queen, because I want him to call with like King 9, King 8, Queen Jack, hands I match up really well against. But back to the 10-3, sometimes I check this back, but against this opponent I like C-betting just because he floats so wide. And he calls, and I decided to check back the turn just to sort of disguise my hand a little. Sort of the same logic as when I check back the flop. Like, he's capable of flatting strong on the flop there, so I didn't want to get raised and have to fold the turn if I'm beat. And also, I can get value from 2x or 7x, possibly on the river, and I would have to fold those. I would fold those out probably if I bet again. This ace-5, I think it's a pretty standard 4-bet shove. Like, his 3-betting range is getting crazy wide, and I think it definitely beats his range, and flatting here sucks, so it's a 4-bet shove. I think pretty easy. And back to this hand, it was kind of interesting. I was confused by this river bet also. Make it. Anyway, he bets like, yeah, okay, finally, like 300. 299, so he typed it in, which is weird, but I think given the range he is capable of flatting on the flop, even though it's somewhat wet and the jack coming also, I think it's a fold. If he was more aggressive on the flop with stronger hands, I'd be more likely to call this, but he could have like a weird queen 6 or like something like, I don't want to just say one hand, but like something like that that he would expect me to think he would raise the flop, because I think he should, but he's definitely capable of flatting that and then over betting it for value also. I decided to flat, so anyway, I folded. I decided to flat the 5s. You could shove it, 3-bet shove it free, but I think flatting might be slightly more plus EV here. I decided to flat the flop because it's a good flop for him to C-bet. So we're at least going to call this street, or the flop. And then the turn is a king. And pretty basic, but he knows that this is a perfect turn card to barrel, so he's got to be barreling it, like, with any two. So, and I think he would check back some decent hands on the flop. But, so anyway, I decided to call this again. And then the 2 comes, which is, honestly, it's a pretty good card, because I think it's going to slow him down from barreling, probably. And it does. And he ends up showing, well, you'll see. But the king 9, I decided to flat and donk this. I think it's pretty standard on this flop. And I'm planning to barrel overs. Yeah, he gave up with A7. Now the queen 9, pretty standard raise. When he donks here, I decide to jam. Well, he does. There we go. I decided to jam because A, it's a very wet board, and B, it looks weak. I'm not surprised when I jam, he snaps me off. I'm not real surprised that he turns over 9x, because I'm sure he's aware that I would check back a lot of air on that flop, so he wants to get it. He wants to get it in. But I think I go ahead and shove 2 because I think it looks a little weaker, and that's fine. Just unlucky. It could have easily been me have king 9, him have queen 9, or him have 9 jack and me have 9-10 or something. So just on maybe a little unfortunate we had the same hand either way, but even though we had runner clubs equity, so we were ahead. He 3-bets again, so I was obviously right, assuming I guess he was trying to establish a tight range early and then change, but even though he's widening his null in 3-bet range, and he did the pot size, which by now I'm not sure he has the same guidelines for me as far as 3-bet sizing at this stack depth. And I mean, if you've seen any of my videos, you know what I'm talking about. Like, I made a whole video basically on that. But anyway, and Merck did too, which I think it's awesome. But anyway, I don't think he's doing that. So I still think queen 8 off isn't quite good enough to flat here, so I decided to go ahead and fold. The king 10, I think flatting here's fine. It's pretty similar to the queen 9 of hearts on the whatever it was, like 8-6-4, 8-king 6-4 3 clubs or something, and I decided not to probe that turn either, and this is kind of the same situation. I don't think I'm folding out anything that beats me, so I just decided to try to show it down and give up if he bets. Okay. I decided to 3-bet here just to keep my non-all-in 3-bet range polarized. Obviously, I'd rather have it be suited. But again, I haven't been doing it very much, so I think that my image might have made up for the fact that I have a little less equity. Plus, I can't just sit here and wait for aces. I have to mix in. I can't wait for 8-5 suited, and although you could maybe argue that I should just let it go and find a better spot or whatever, I still think it's okay. So that's why I did it. Now he calls, which I don't really have much info. Seems relatively tight facing 3-bets, but we just haven't really done it enough yet, so I don't know. This pretty bad flop, really. I think it hits him relatively hard, but I decided to fire at it once anyway. Plus, we could bink a 7, and if we check fold, we can't see the turn. I debated a barrel here, but I think the 10 hits him some. But more importantly, he's capable of flatting very good hands on that flop in this spot, like Jack X, 6-6. He hasn't 4-bet yet, so I can't assume he 4-bet shoves this. Or can't assume he 4-bet shoves 6s. Pocket 9s, 7-8, flush draws, stuff like that. Basically hands that aren't folding. So I decided to check. I debated when he checks back. I debated a river bluff, but basically the same logic as the turn. And he could be inducing, and that line, my line, would look super weak. I wasn't surprised when he had a pair, but I was surprised that he had King X suited. I think flatting that versus my non-all-in 3-bet range is not very good. Like, I almost never do that personally. I think it honestly might be a leak. But anyway, King 9 suited, standard raise and C-bet. Now with 5-7 suited, he just saw me 3-bet 8-5 off, and I thought it was okay to 3-bet this just because he's still opening super wide, and I just showed him a weak non-all-in 3-bet, and I like to do this against regs a lot, to where like they'll think, oh, there's no way that he's doing it again, like he's card racking now or whatever, and I think this time he was just on the strong end of his range because he didn't even think twice. He just snap shoved. And I mean, that's fine. You're not going to... I don't know what he has, so... Plus, I wanted to make sure an insta-fold because that shows that I had totally zilch. Basically. Pretty standard open shove here. He ends up calling with 8-9, which I don't love. I love the logic, but I'd rather have like 8-9 suited or 7-8 suited, stuff like that. I think I made a mistake. I wish I wouldn't have told him I've been playing hypers, because I don't think he would have made this call had I not told him that, because he knows enough about that and those to know that I'm only jamming 2s, 3s, 4s, and 5s here at 25 deep, whatever, in the small blind. And anyway, as played, he probably just has just about enough equity to call. So, nice hand. But I really think that if I didn't tell him that I've been doing that lately, then he might not have called. But again, 8-9 suited, 7-8 suited, stuff like that, yeah. I just think that might be a stretch. But if you run it, I mean, he's got enough equity. You only need like, whatever, 48%, I think, something like that. So, it's fine. It's just pretty... It's pretty high variance with that. Now, versus, like, if you have 7-8 suited or whatever, it's your favorite. So that's different. But anyway, with pocket sixes, I decided to open shove this here because A, he's been flatting wide at these stacks, and 6-6 sucks post flop usually. And B, maybe I could get a call. He just called me with 8-9, so maybe he's still thinking I'm shoving 2s through 5s. So maybe I could get a call from like 6-7 or something like that. Was my logic here. Normally I would min raise this as default, but at this stack, but I think it's fine. Given that I know he's capable of calling me with maybe like 6-7 suited, something like that. I've noticed something else too. I think at this point he might not even know about Raffle, which surprises me. If he does, he sure isn't using it. So, I mean, he's min raising 80% and he's not limping anything at like 15 deep. So, I can 3-bet shove a lot wider for profit in spots where I would flat as standard. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind. This hand right here, the Queen 9 standard flat, I decided to check raise the flop because I know he's been opening super wide and he's probably c-betting this flop almost every time, and it's worth noting that he c-bet 60 half pot, which I think I would probably c-bet like 45 or 50, but anyway, I decided to check raise, and I was planning on jamming the turn if he called. Because of the way stacks are, I think it works pretty well. On the A7, pretty standard. I decided not to barrel the turn because it was a 5, and again, he's capable of flatting that flop with good hands that should probably raise it, like King X, you know, even King Jack, whatever. So, plus I had a bit of showdown value. And he ends up jamming here. You know, it's easy to say, oh, well, I should have folded, but I think long term, I think it's fine. Um, 9-7 is where I'm going to start. This is like the bottom end of my like standard 16 to 20 limping range. Pocket 2s, I'm 3-bet shoving. Now when he it's a pretty standard stab. I was planning to barrel the turn if it's higher than the 4, and also rivers it in pair as a default, because I think he'd ISO a lot of paint combos pre. And this 10's a good card to barrel, and it also gives some equity. And the way stacks are, if he calls this, I'm shoving the turn. If it's the only thing I'm not shoving is probably like, oh, I'd have to think about that. But like cards that pair the board or pair me aren't great. But anything else, I'm pretty much jamming. A 4, a 5, on up to an 8 for sure. I don't know about a 9. I'd probably check back a 9 just because I don't think he ever has. I don't know. I don't want to get too sidetracked, but that was my logic here. Now this 10-7 hand, I made a big mistake on this hand. Absolutely. It's a pretty standard call, but on the flop, I should have just folded on the flop. On a high-low paired board like this, if I check raise, which isn't awful in my opinion to mix in as a bluff, but I've shown that I'm capable of check raise bluffing here. And he knows that. And he's going to ship a lot of hands on me when I do that probably have decent equity. Basically, flush draws, 3x, but more importantly, 2 overs to the 3. Like if we had the same hand, he might ship it because he knows that I'm check raising super wide, and he knows that it also has good equity counting the fold equity and the equity. Even if I do have 3x, he's still not crushed. Another thing, he knows that I almost never have 4s or better here because of the pre-flop action. So, as played, I made a mistake thinking that he would have flatted my check raise with the King X, and it felt like he was playing it like he had 3x and he was kind of do some kind of like stupid like see where he's at type raise, because I would think, I don't want to say he should be because obviously it worked, but I would say for the most part you would want to be flatting your King X here, just because I'm drawing dead so often and I'm going to keep barreling, and he knows that. But anywho, he decides to make it like 350 or something tiny. I think maybe 400. Yeah, 395, which is, looking back, it's pretty obvious that it's like, oh god, please shove. I have pocket, or I have the nuts, basically, is what it's, looking back, like it's pretty obvious, but as the logic at the time was, I felt like I had a ton of fold equity because he has a 3x here a lot. And, I mean, honestly, like, it's unlikely he has a king. I mean, you know, I don't think it was the worst thing of all time. It just happened to be this time, but... So anyway, I decided to go all in, and he snaps, and I know before he even shows me, I'm almost dead. So that was probably a mistake. So we can't win. So he wins that one too. But nice hand, you know, well played. Let's see here. I'm gonna go ahead and skip a little bit. There's nothing really major happens in like the next minute till we get 2 going again. I decided to check raise here just because if I'm doing it when I'm super weak, I'm going to do it when I'm super strong too. Oh, that's a good spot. Jack 5, it's a standard size, standard C-bet. I think this is... I decided to 4-bet shove since his 3-betting range is getting super wide, and Ace-4 suited is ahead of that range, and flatting's just awful. So I think I made a mistake calling. The flop was fine, but I think I called the turn also, which isn't very good. Yeah, I did. Which my logic at the time was, yeah, he's repping that card a lot, but Actually, I don't. I think he would have checked back 3x, 6x. Actually, I don't hate it at all. He's got a lot of air on that turn. And, I mean, obviously, it's a terrible river for us, so. The King 9's standard min raise. Excuse me. And he tank calls, I think. I guess he was debating shoving. I don't know. Who knows? So anyway, standard C-bet. He check shoves, and it's pretty much a snap, just because he should be check jamming any flush draws, any king X, maybe even 4-5. Like 4-5 of spades or something. So we call, and I think he has like king 6. Or, yeah. So, whatever. So anyway, pretty standard with the 8-9. He check called on the flop, which is, it could mean he's strong, so we just keep firing. And that's a great card for us. I think I could have probably bet a lot more, but I decided, I went pretty high with it. I think I bet like 270 or something, which is a pretty big bet. Oh, yeah, that's right. I bet 365. Okay. So, I mean, I bet pretty big, knowing that he's got probably a pretty strong range, honestly. Just because he's capable of taking that line, well, you'll see, like 9x, 8x, a bunch of different stuff, which, like, having Jack 9 there looks great when you dodge a cooler like that, but I just think long term, I don't know. I just don't think it's great. But anyway, we win a pretty big pot there. Now this hand, I think I made a mistake with, I believe. Yeah, I think I should have just folded, because he's shown earlier he checked back to Queen 3 on an Ace Jack 8 flop where he should have C-bet all day long, and here I would think he would be C-betting too, but I think his range is going to be a lot stronger, I think. I'm not sure, and I wasn't sure at the time, so I decided to call it. And I believe we just check it down. So, I mean, that's what I should know by now, but I don't know. He does some of the weirdest things, and, like, I don't know for sure what he would do with a hand like, probably check it back, but, like, King 5, stuff like that. I mean, would he really check that back on a perfect C-betting board? I don't know. And now I decided I probably can't call much, because that queen could have hit him, and he's capable of betting it for value. We finally get a decent hand. Ace King here. Don't get any action, but whatever. This is an interesting hand. I decided to check raise the flop. It's relatively dry. And he might check back 4x or maybe even 2x. So I figured his range has a lot of air in it. So I check raise playing into barrel, turn, and river unless it's really bad for that. And I also know he's capable of flatting the check raise with ace high, but folding it to barrels. So he flats. So he still could have anything here. And the 3 really isn't a good card for barreling, usually. But I think here, in this spot, it actually is. he's aware enough to know that I know a good barrel. Like, he knows that I know that this is a bad barrel card. So if I bet it, then he might think, oh wow, he still bet on a bad barrel card. He must have something pretty good. So that was my logic. So I decided to bet it. And I was planning to jam basically any river at this point. I think given the amount of air still in his range and how big the pot is after he calls, I mean, it's the best choice. Plus, I know he's capable of flatting with like a flush draw or something, where I think you should like get it in on the flop probably, just so you avoid that. Almost like just call and hope type stuff. I don't know, but anyway, like when the 9 comes, I think check calling is best. Obviously, it sucks if he has a king, but he could bluff jam flush draws that whiffed, or maybe even something weird like pocket 5s or pocket or 9x, a weaker 9x. So I decided to check, and he turned out to have ace 8. And honestly, even though he was right that time, I just honestly don't get the turn call stack size wise. Maybe if he was planning calling any river, but you really don't have much showdown value at that point. Like, obviously he's set on heroing me there, and it would have been interesting if a spade or a 5 or higher came, except the 8, and I jammed like I planned to see what he would have done. If honestly he can say he would have snapped me off, then well played, sir, nice hand. If he wasn't going to call that, and I mean, you know, it's easy to say, yes, I was calling or whatever, but if he wasn't going to, then, you know, I don't really love the turn call just because we're getting shallow. But anyway, we get lucky and bank the 9. Pretty interesting hand, though. It just shows you that he's willing to call us down with like anything. So he 3-bet shoves 3, standard call, and we just sucky run out. Which, you know, whatever. I'm gonna speed it up just a little. Oh, we picked up kings and no action. Queen 10, here we go, standard flat. I decided to donk bet this flop. I think it's fine. I'm planning to barrel if he flats, just because he should raise Jack X. You know, like I said, I'm planning to barrel, so I do. Plus, we have a lot of equity. I think his range is pretty capped. When the 10 comes, I decided to check call because I think his range, like I said, I think it's pretty capped, and there are a few draws that miss that he could bet. But I was real surprised when he bets. Like, basically my logic here was, I think he almost never has a jack. So I snapped it off, and it turns out that he did. And I mean, you know, I would probably not flat that flop, and I didn't think he would either. And that's where I kind of made a mistake interpreting, like I made an incorrect assumption, and that just shows you that, you know, it can backfire on you big time. So when you're assuming things, you want them to be right. But, you know, I don't really hate what happened here on this hand. I really don't. Like, I think it's safe to assume, and now I know, but I think it's kind of brutal that we hit the 10 too, and he flatted, you know, like, I don't know, it was kind of weird. I would have raised that flop, but that's just me. So he actually plays a lot different than I thought he would, is what I'm getting at. standard c-bet here. I think he folds. Yeah, we can fast forward. There's one more hand. I think the last hand was worth. Yeah. We have the button king 8, standard min. We flop top pair on a pretty. It's the kind of board where I wouldn't mind betting a little bit bigger, but the way stacks are, we're probably not going to have a hard time getting it in, even if we c-bet half pot. So I don't think it's that big a deal to bet like 70 or anything. Plus, he might think it like always betting bigger. He's strong, you know. He might pick up on that, so that's fine. Half pot will work. And he calls so wide, so I think it's okay. So we c-bet half. He calls. Basically, at this point, I'm getting it. If he check shoves the turn, I'm getting it in. It's just a cooler, probably, more than anything. He calls again. Now, looking at his stats, I mean, he could have ace high here. He could have 2x. He could have anything. So, I mean, I think I'm way ahead. I decided to jam the river because that's exactly what I would do if I had been barreling and I wanted him to fold and I thought there weren't many 10x's in his range. And I also assumed he would have check jammed the flop with like 7-9, 10-8, 2-2, stuff like that. And it turned out that he had 7-9, which I was kind of shocked by, to be honest with you. Like, I'm not a fan of how he played this at all. Like, especially the turn flat. I mean, if you bink that, or if you whiff that, which you almost always do, like, what are you gonna do? Just give up? Like, I don't know. We weren't very deep, so, but it looks great when you bink it, so whatever. That was the last hand, I think. And I mean, all in all, for not playing turbos for a few months, I feel like my game's still pretty good. I definitely had some spots where my logic was flawed and my interpretation of his default play was a little bit off, and it cost me. But also, you know, I wasn't very fortunate overall, too. And I think that's worth saying because I don't want it to take away from the logic of what I was trying to do. So, anyway, that's it. And just thanks, guys. Let me know what you think. I'm planning on doing some more as soon as I can. So, see y'all. Thanks.